curious if how many of you were able to attend the tutorial that Jen hosted on yesterday. Crazy, it was just yesterday. And was it helpful? I'm sharing, so I can't see the chat right now. I'm starting to share my screen, but hopefully some of you were able to catch it. I know those great intentions. Was it helpful? Cool. Yeah, so if you weren't able to, as I mentioned before, that's okay. Remember, all of the tutorials are recorded, just like our lessons, and Jen will have that posted to the Hive. If it isn't already there, it may be there already. So catch it when you can, when you're able. And you should start to get invitations now to the Sunday review sessions. They're called Coach's Corner sessions. I mentioned this at the very beginning of our class, or time together in session 1, that the Coach's Corner sessions are where we take one topic, like training evaluation, for example, and we'll spend 30 minutes on that topic, taking a deeper dive. So once again, if you're not able to attend those sessions, they're from 8 o'clock to 8:30 Eastern time on Sundays. Those are also recorded and you'll have access to the recordings. So encourage you to attend. Just know that if a topic may be covered that we haven't talked about in class yet, and that's okay. Well, we will definitely get to the topics. So even if you haven't heard about it in class, I encourage you to attend, or again, catch the recording if you're not able to attend live. You might have noticed that I have been turning the live transcripts on. So you have the ability on your side to turn them off if you want to. You just click on the 3 buttons that say more, and that should be like toward the bottom of your screen. And you can choose to hide the transcript so that you don't see them scrolling on the bottom. All right. So let's talk about the evaluation of training effectiveness. Last week when we met, we talked about the training needs assessment, so a systems model of training. We looked at the ADDIE model, and we talked about the design, so the materials, putting the materials together, thinking about the type of space, making accommodations for people. So thinking about not only the on-site versus off-site, but also the training room itself and what you need to have in place. So we're going to assume, let's just assume you're trainers, you finished your training, and now it's time to evaluate the effectiveness of training. So let me ask you a question. Well, our objectives here you can see on the screen. And once again, be sure to test yourself against the objectives on the screen. And if the ones in the book are a little bit different, then be sure that you're cross-referencing and making sure that you can actually do these things. So know the 4 criteria used to evaluate training, what each of them mean. And then we'll talk about research design models that apply to and are best to use for training evaluation. Before, I want to know, what are you evaluating? So let's say you are creating a training evaluation form, and you are looking at measuring the learning or the behavior or the results. What are you going to use as your criteria for evaluating the effectiveness? Thanks, Stefan. I know I did this on Monday. Stefan. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so the objectives of the training, that's right. So I know it says it on the screen, but just want to get you involved right off the bat. So you're going to go back to your objectives. And the questions that you ask on your evaluation form are going to be intended to measure some type of the learning, whether or not the participants actually learned what you set out for them to learn. You're going to look for actual behavioral changes in the work environment. And then you're also going to look at measurable results, which may come a little bit later. So breaking down each one of these, looking at reactions, the first one is simply, what did training think? What did the participants think about your training? Did they like it? So the reactions of learners help you as a trainer to understand if the program was delivered in a meaningful way, in a way that it had a positive impact on the learners. If the program was interesting, you might even ask them what their primary takeaway was. You're probably going to ask them to evaluate you as the trainer. So how well did I do as a trainer? What was my knowledge level of the materials? How did I present? Did I present in a clear way? So those are typically called reaction forms. They are collected through questionnaires, surveys that are sent post-training, or how many of you have been years ago to a live training, and maybe you're going back now, where at the end of the session, you were handed a form and asked to leave it with the trainer when you left the room. You can come off mute, or you can type in the chat. Essentially, maybe it was like 5 questions. Yeah, so some of you, yep. Yeah, so those are reaction forms. That's level 1. By the way, what we're looking at now are called the Kirkpatrick method of training evaluation. There are 4 levels. Now, and oftentimes now we're sending them out immediately after training. Barbara, you raised your hand. Awesome. Via a survey software like SurveyMonkey or some survey generator, something like that, to get the reactions of participants. So that's level 1. It's interesting, but it doesn't get to the level of the other 3. The next level being learning. Essentially, you're measuring retention of the material that was covered. Were the deliverables clear enough that the participants learned something new? How do we measure learning? Think about your school days. Think about what you're doing, what you're going to do here at the end of this class. How do we measure whether or not you learned? Yeah, an exam, a test. So we're doing that through your assessments. And at the end, you get the big one, the final one, right? With HRCI, where you actually sit for your certification exam. So that's an example of a learning evaluation form, the second level. Now, the next level, and each of these are progressive, okay? Assessing the adjustment of desired behaviors. So behaviors now, behavior change as it relates to the training is key to determining the effectiveness of your training program. 2 methods to assess changes in behavior include a self-report questionnaire. So you're asking the employees to evaluate whether or not they're actually using what they learned on the job. And then the other is through observation. So the supervisor might be assessing whether or not the behavior of their team members has changed. In this context, let's say you implemented, let's say you had a safety training program, but your accident rate was pretty high. And so after the training, the supervisor is going to be watching people to make sure that they're using, for example, the PPE, right? So they're wearing the goggles when they're soldering now. They are pulling down their safety, the safety shield when they're using the lath on the manufacturing floor. Those are behavior changes. That's great. You can actually observe. They weren't doing this before the training and they're doing it now. The big one is measurable results. This is the often the most overlooked, as you can imagine, the most valuable data we want as trainers to be able to prove our SALT, right? That our training is really good. And the measurable results in that safety training would be a reduction in accidents, right? That would be the ultimate. I'm going to put everybody on mute just because I'm getting some background noise, but if you want to talk, always feel free to come off mute. That's the ultimate. So, last year we had, I don't know, I'm just going to throw what will sound like a big number out there. We had 32 accidents. At the end of 2020, we had 32 accidents total. In 2021, we did safety training. And at the end of 2021, we had, I don't know, cut it in half. Those are measurable results, right? Make sense? So metrics are what we're looking for. Metrics help to demonstrate that we met the training objectives, that we were successful. Let's see. Just know the definitions of application objectives. So application objectives, applying the skills, that's under measurable results. And then impact objectives, again, so the impact that it has on the organization. So behavioral changes are an example of application. You can actually see them doing something different. And then, of course, impact objectives are, like I said, at the end of the year when you have a marked reduction in the number of accidents that take place. Utility analysis is looking at the training cost, direct costs. So just throw out there, what do you think are direct costs related to training? I know we have an accountant keeping me honest. What are direct costs? Anyone, though.
You're funny.
I know, I remember. Yeah, so wages, materials. Yep. Those are direct costs. They're tangible. So direct costs are that you can think of like the venue. Yeah. So the things that you're gonna write a check for these things, direct, right? What are indirect costs? Snacks would be a direct cost because you got to write. It's those are tangible opportunity costs. Yes. So time away from work. Yep. Yeah. So that's what's meant when the book says direct and indirect costs. So you have to consider all things. So essentially it's measuring the ROI, and that's done through utility analysis. All right, let's talk about sources of data. So when we're asked to evaluate the effectiveness of training, so we talked about questionnaires and surveys just a bit, right? Archive data. So what is meant by archive data? You can come off mute if you want. I just had to put everybody on mute because I was getting some background noise. Yeah, employee records, historical. It's data that exists in a file somewhere, electronically, physical files. Performance reviews could be considered archive data. Your accident and injury and illness logs can be considered archive data. So why are these called unobtrusive measures? Why is archive data unobtrusive?
They don't influence the way employees act all the time.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. And you don't interact with employees, as Omar said. Yep. You already have the content. Yes. Thank you, Stefan. Absolutely. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm second guessing myself. We're going to talk about more of these, but I just want to point out the opposite of archive data is observations. So the Hawthorne effect occurs when somebody knows they're being watched. And the Hawthorne effect can work in a positive way. It can work in favor of employees, and it also can work against the employer. So the Hawthorne effect could be maybe you have a district manager. Anybody work in retail here or have worked in retail? Just by show of hands, or yes. And yeah. So what happens when the district manager shows up? You're on your best behavior, right? Like the clothes are folded a little bit better. You're actually using the folding boards, right? To fold the shirts. The folding boards come out. Yeah. So they're being watched. So they're going to perform, they're going to be on their best behavior. But it can also work in a different way. So let's say you're doing, we'll talk about compensation and benefits, but let's say you're doing a compensation study, and the way that you're going about job evaluation is to observe people working. And this, guess what? This happened 5 years ago. So the last time, 5 years ago, the last time the compensation people came in and observed people working on the manufacturing floor, they were on their best behavior because they needed to be. But because they were on their best behavior, as Peter has said, the data wasn't accurate. It was skewed because they were being watched. So that first time they were on their best behavior, they were actually optimally, like they were working as hard as they could. So their output was maybe, let's say 100 units an hour, when their normal pace was more like 92. But compensation said, well, they consistently produced 100 units per hour. So they bumped up the expectation. And now the expectation is you will produce 100 units an hour every day. This is the new standard. You said it. We watched you. You said it. So 5 years fast forward, we go back in. We're going to study compensation, and people on the floor see us, and they're like, you know what? The last time we performed at our best, we got penalized. We didn't get increases in pay, but it was like expected for us to do more. So what do they do this time? Yeah. Yeah. And they tell the new people who weren't there last time, hey, slow down. This is here. Let's tell you what happened last time. If you produce over, they're going to expect us to, and we're not necessarily going to get that much more money for it. So don't do it. Just keep it at our normal rate. Don't try to show off here. So that's the Hawthorne effect. Thanks for playing along there. Yeah, so other sources of data to evaluate the effectiveness of training. And I mentioned observations earlier too, when I talked about, so the supervisor's actually seeing and noticing that people are wearing the PPE, the personal protective equipment now. So that's a form of observation as well. But interviews, talking to people, we did talk about that a little bit. Simulation. So we talked about using simulators when we talked about off the job training. So simulations can be used. Simulations can also be simulations of data. So what we expect to happen as a result of training. Critical incidents, we're going to come to this Monday when we meet. Critical incidents are observations of behavior that are either really good, so like the expectation, the gold standard, or incidents or behaviors at work that are not good, that you want people to avoid in the future. And critical incidents are often tied to performance evaluations. So throughout the year, ideally, your managers are noting critical incidents so that they can come back and they don't have to construct the performance evaluation from their memory or having to go back through a year of data or 6 months of data, whatever it is. They've got these critical incidents in their file. Doesn't mean the person has sat down, the supervisor sat down and talked with the employee, although they should have, for sure. Okay, so this is one of the alternative style questions, a matching question. So we're going to match the criteria for 4 stages of evaluating training from the left column with the feature or definition in the right column. So reactions of participants. What is the correct definition? And then B, measurable results. C, learning new skills and competencies. And then D, behavior change. There's a little bit of an advantage to the matching because you can go with the ones that you know for sure and leave the ones that maybe you're not sure. Come back to them. Process of elimination. All right. So reactions. And we talked about this. This is essentially a questionnaire. It's either given at the right at the end of training if you're in person or delivered via questionnaire using a survey type system. But anyway, it's about satisfaction. It's like, what was your satisfaction with these 5 different criteria? You know, rating on a scale of 1 to 5. Measurable results, measurable, quantitative. So if measurable results are quantitative, what are the reactions of participants? What type of data is that? Quantitative is what we can measure. And by the way, learning new skills and behavior change are also quantitative.
Is it qualitative?
Yes. Thank you. Who was that talking? Because I can't see.
I'm sorry, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara. Yes, qualitative. Thanks, Barbara and Aubrey. Yep, qualitative data. Quality. All right. So C, learning new skills and competencies is for learning, transfer of learning. That's the 3rd level. And then where we get into the ROI is D, behavior change. And that is that behavior is changed and you start to measure again, sort of that return on investment through utility analysis. All right, well, that brings us to the end of that brief section. You have the 2 self-assessment items, which are really, again, training evaluation, going back to the objectives that were at the beginning of the unit, and just measuring yourself, assessing yourself. And we're going to talk about talent management programs now. Just drink of water there real quick. Okay, so What are we going to do? We're going to differentiate between orientation and onboarding and talk about career planning and career progression within the organization. All right, so new employee orientation. Essentially, with new employee orientation, you are welcoming people into the organization. It's their first look at you. You want to get it right. Many of you had a particularly pleasing employee orientation where you felt really welcome. No? Oh my goodness. Where I used to work, we had what was called a culture club, and one of our culture club committees was focused on improving our employee orientation experience. I tell you what, when I first started there, it was lacking. It wasn't horrible, it just was lacking. I mean, I felt like I had so many questions that really could have been answered for me in orientation or even in pre-boarding, even before I got there. Okay, so yeah, you do them for your clients, college. Okay, yeah. So essentially, this is your opportunity to make a good first impression. And yeah, it makes people really, like, it sticks with you, right, Patricia? So that first impression is so important. So make it effective. And by the way, employee orientation, when does it start? When does your orientation start? Or begin, I should say. Day one. Acceptance of the offer. Okay. So yeah, I mean, really, yes, the formal orientation starts on day one because you're going to start drinking from the fire hose on that day, right? But really, effective orientation starts before. It's sort of that, for example, at my company, what we did as a result of this new committee coming together is we started sending out a swag bag to our new hires that arrived way before they started. And it gave them an insight into our company culture, what was important to us. And we also sent out an employee fact sheet and a nice laminated that had our values on it. And so things like that. So orientation really should begin before the employee steps foot into the office on day one. And yeah, day one is really where the rubber starts to hit the road. But because it's so overwhelming with people, you definitely want to provide information, not only orally, but also in a written format. So we also developed a very comprehensive orientation site within our intranet so that people could not only have the information that we were sharing on day one and beyond, but also have this resource that they could go back to at any time. Because I don't know about you, but when you start a new job, it's hard. Swag bag, I know, funny, huh? Yeah. So when you start a new job, it's embarrassing. You have to go back and say, I know you covered this, but I can't remember, what you told me. I'm so sorry. It's just been overwhelming. But okay, so Ulti-Pro. So we're going to talk about a system that you use for orientation and onboarding in just a second. But you, as the person doing the orientation, whoever it is, might be the manager, it might be someone in the HR department. It's a combination of people typically. But someone has to decide what information is needed in priority sequence for the new employee. So you're prioritizing what's most important. Some things that come out of the HR department, what are they? What are the most important things that you need from the employee on day one? Yeah, two forms of ID for the I-9, pay, benefits, I-9. You got to tell them when to show up for work, what time. Yeah, working hours, the W-2, the handbook. Yes, absolutely. Yep. The facility tour, schedule, they need to meet their manager. Right. So most relevant information first. And then, of course, it's really nice to have a mentor. This is the person that you go to for those questions that you really want to ask, the burning questions, but you don't want to ask your supervisor and maybe not even the HR department. Like, what are the unspoken rules of the road here? Please give me the inside scoop. And then also, of course, to help with the day-to-day work. Okay, so now we have onboarding. And onboarding is also known as socialization into the organization. And onboarding is super important in that individuals are integrated into the company. The mentors are providing information that's really important. So not only, again, like, how do you do your job type knowledge? So there's training involved, but then there's also that really important, like, hey, here's what you need to know about for example, isn't there someone in an organization always that no matter what you ask them, they know the answer? Like, you just know, if I have a question, I'm not sure who to ask, I'm going to go to Mary first. Peter, that's you. The HR business partner. Yeah, sometimes it's someone in HR. Sometimes it's not. It's like in my former organization, it was Mary Lou, and Mary Lou had been with the organization since the organization started. This woman had so much institutional knowledge that if people did not know where to go or where to begin to get an answer to a question, they went to her, because if she couldn't answer the question, she knew how to point you in the right direction. And she was so nice and gracious. So the informal relationships that start to build happen in the onboarding process. And then Utilisource, I think, who mentioned, was it Barbara? UtiliPro, sorry. UtiliPro, Barbara mentioned. So oftentimes you'll have a portal, an organizational portal. I mentioned our intranet. That was something that we created, but sometimes there's a portal like UtiliPro, or it might be your HRIS system, a special place where you have resources and organizational references that employees can go to at any point and any time to learn, to get answers, etc. There's a really good list of activities. If you are thinking like, our employee orientation and onboarding process is really light and we should be fit up, there's a really good guide that you can use starting on page 120 to 122. And then there are some distinctions. How many of you call onboarding and orientation the same thing, or feel it's part of the same process? And it's fine if you do. Yeah, a lot of companies do. What's super important, well, you're taking a test, so you definitely want to understand what the book tells you the differences are. But for you all in your career, what's super important is that if you do just call everything orientation, and again, that's fine, it simplifies the process for people, or you do call everything onboarding, that you're not shortchanging it. Okay, so that you're making sure that you include all of the steps. So some key differentiators. Please note on your slide, it says a 1-day event. It should not say 1 day. So please correct that if you printed the slides. Orientation is a one-time thing. Okay, so when a person is finished with their I-9, they're finished with their I-9, unless they need to make, updates in the future. It's a one-time event, but you're only going to meet your team for the first time one time. You're only going to be, ushered to your desk one time. The orientation is a one-time event. again, you are, I don't want to use the same word, orienting people to your organization, but you probably give them an org chart. You let them know who your key executives are and who reports to them. And hopefully you're letting them know about how each department functions and what the importance is to the overall organization structure. They get it in information, what are your values, your mission, your vision, handbook, payroll, benefits, etc. Onboarding extends well beyond the first few days. It could be 3 months. If you are a CEO of a company, it could be a year to 2 years. And so the length of onboarding really depends on the position. And essentially, this is the where education comes in. Individuals are learning more about the culture, the mission, and the goals. They're of course, going through training as well to understand how to do their jobs. But if you have a really effective orientation and onboarding program, it really does reduce the time it takes to hit the ground running. But you've got to have people who are willing to pause and take time out of their own days to train and orient people. It's a good question. If you are let go for a period of time for whatever reason, and then you're rehired, do you have to do this again? It depends on the organization and the lapse, the period of time. I'm just relating to the HRIS system. Typically, the archive data still exists, right? So you could go into your HRIS system and rehire the person. So some of their information will carry over, like their date of birth shouldn't change, their social shouldn't change, but all the other information would need to be updated. And then if you've had a significant change in business operations, then, absolutely, or change in leadership, et cetera. Yeah, refresher might be just fine. Good question. Okay, multiple. So this is a knowledge check that has multiple responses. So here we're going to identify the 3 elements of an effective new employee orientation. So 3 of these are correct. A, include basic operational and employment details. B, begin before the new employees are even hired. C, led by the training manager. D, include all new hires onboarded within the last month. E, provide self-fulfilling prophecies. F, should be limited to 1 day. All right, so the correct, I'll just go through each one of them as I have a variety of responses here. Okay, so A is correct. And I think the majority of you had A. Of course, in your orientation, you're including basic operational and employment details. B is correct. We talked about this. We talked about the importance of creating that first impression, a really good first impression. And you do that by beginning before your new employees are even hired. So before day 1, before they walk in or virtually are welcomed. Orientation can be led by a variety of people. So and especially not specifically the training manager. It might be the HR person. It could be the manager. It could be the business owner. So C is not correct. D is not correct because orientation comes before onboarding. If you're following what we learned in the book. Okay, so, and that's essentially what you want to do when you're thinking about taking the actual exam. It's not what your organization does, but like, what does the book present? And then also, what are the laws? So including all new hires onboarded within the last month, that orientation, you're way overdue with the I-9 form. They haven't been paid. So that one is not correct. E is correct because you're pumping people up. So part of that process and part of the reason you want to involve different types of people in the orientation is that you're pumping them up and priming them for success. So telling them what a good fit they're going to be for the position, and how all the information that they're being provided is going to set them up for success. So those self-fulfilling prophecies are very powerful. And then F is not correct because remember I told you on your slide it said one day, but you need to correct that and write instead one-time event. But it could be more than one day. Okay. Let's talk about career planning and development. Things have changed over the last several decades, and so much in the last 10, 5, 3, especially 2 years. So career planning is the responsibility of you. You are responsible. You are in charge of your career. Your company, if you're fortunate enough to work for a company that offers career planning and development services, then there are a variety of ways that organizations offer that. So why do companies offer career planning and development? One of the reasons that we talked about was succession planning, right? So organizations should be thinking about who is our next generation of team leads, managers, executives, VPs, CEOs, et cetera. So succession planning is a good reason for career development. Growth from within, absolutely, is another reason. Yep. Increasing motivation. Yep. Yeah. So they help people to, career development programs are formal. That doesn't mean they're extremely comprehensive, but they help people to continue to grow and develop after they begin with your company. And so career, just when we're talking about a career ladder, it's basically like what you see on the screen, that image of someone stepping up from one position to the next. So the book talks about professionals. So professions like accountants, lawyers. We can also think about you all. So, you might start in an HR assistant role. Maybe you start as a front desk person or as an assistant to the CEO. You start, and I'm just going to bucket that and call it HR assistant. Then the next step up the ladder, once you learn and master the skills of an HR assistant, is you become an HR associate. After you master the skills at that particular level, then you move up the ladder to, let's say HR generalist, and then HR generalist to HR manager, and then director of HR. Okay, so there's the career ladder is where you're mastering skills at one level in order to move to the next level. A career lattice, this is a new slide. So career lattice is not as well defined as a career ladder. And we did talk about this just briefly But a career lattice really is lets individuals try on a variety of roles with the ultimate goal of advancing in their career. So, we have, how many of you are not currently HR professionals? And what role, and you want to become one? And what role are you in now? Yeah, a lot of you, right? Okay, intern, fabulous, 50-50, accounting, a couple accounting, patient care coordinators. Okay, so for you all, moving from your career, whatever you're doing right now, accountant, care professional, moving into the HR profession is considered a lattice approach. So you're moving from one place to another. So it might be a lateral move for you, meaning you're not going to necessarily make a lot more money. Maybe you will, but it's more of a lateral move that allows you to get into a different field or a different occupation. And the steps aren't defined within a single profession or department. So some people in public education want to go into HR, for example, or become like a corporate trainer, or vice versa. Training director might want to go back to school to get their teaching certificate because they just love training and want to teach now. So that's an example of a lattice. So what is a career plateau? And by the way, you might be looking to move from from your current role, whatever field you're in, into HR because of a plateau. So I have some responses in here where no more space to grow, going nowhere. You learned all you can in a career. You can't move up when you've peaked. Limited point of advancement. Yes. So a career lattice might be what you do in that case. You're going to move into a different field using all the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that you've acquired through, your current profession. So within career plateaus, there are 3 different types. I feel like I've kind of hit most of these at one point or another. So structural is like, hey, there's no promotion opportunity. You may work for a very small organization and you already have an HR manager. And so you were brought in as a support staff, and you supported the admin function. And then you started just doing HR assisting work. And now you're an HR generalist, but that HR director is still there, and that HR director plans on retiring with the company. And you feel like, hey, I am now primed to, grow and have a promotion into an HR manager position, but it's not going to happen here. So I'm going to leave the company. So structural is where somebody leaves the company for a new opportunity or challenge. Or again, lateral movement into somewhere else within the organization. Content, it's like, yeah, you know what? I've done all I can do. How many of you feel like you've mastered your current job and that's why you're looking to get into HR? Like, I'm just bored. I want something new and fresh. I've learned everything I can about X. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's a content plateau. And then life, it's like, I remember when my daughter graduated from high school, I went through a real life shifting, altering plateau where I was like, my daughter went away to college. She doesn't live at home with us anymore. And so I don't know, the job that was I'm just questioning, I have no more meaning or purpose anymore. I'm not a mom. So is my job really giving me that meaning and purpose? Not really. So I want to look for something that is more meaningful and purposeful. For me, that was working for a company where I was super duper excited and into the mission and the purpose. They had to have a good value proposition for me to go work there, doing good for the world. Okay. So those are the different types of career plateaus. Oh, we didn't talk about the dual career ladder, did we? So what is it? A dual career ladder refers to which of the following? Actually, we did, but just in a different context, we talked about this. So A, an employee pursues both a managerial career track and a technical career track. B, an employee holds 2 full-time jobs. C, an employee changes specialties mid-career. Or D, employee leaves retirement to pursue a new career. All right, the correct answer is A. Am I dreaming that I drew like a ladder and showed you? I'm fairly certain we did talk about this, but now I'm thinking like maybe it was another class. By the way, I don't draw very well, so I don't know. It's entirely possible I had a dream about teaching this class tonight, and that's what I'm thinking about, because nobody's saying, yes, you did, we did talk about this a little bit. Anyhow, there's also the mommy and daddy career track, so which is quickly, shifting. Yes, I did. Thanks to Haya. It's like, sometimes I do dream about things and think that they actually happen. I'm sure that happens to you guys sometimes too, but like the opposite of deja vu. Yeah, I did, because I drew a Y. Okay, so mommy and daddy career track, essentially it's for one of the parents wanting to stay home and focus on parenting or raising the kids. Okay, so, and I think that language is quickly drawing or shifting over to just a parental track, All right, that brings us to the end of this section. There are 2 self-assessment items. And by the way, if you are in that place, I know, Justin, you said you're an intern. I just want to go back to page 125. If you are in that career transition phase where you're shifting from one professional space into another space, don't discount doing volunteer work. I know I talked on the phone to one additional classmate who shared that that's what they're doing. They're doing some volunteer work right now just to get some experience. And that's something you can use on your resume. If you want to, let's say you want to become a I don't know, what tell me something that's interests you. Why are you drawn to HR? What area do you want to move into?
Training and development.
Okay, so let's say you want to move into training and development. Find an organization that lights you up. I talked about meaning and purpose. So think about a social cause that you're super passionate about, and contact a nonprofit in that space and say, I'm working on transitioning in my career, want to get into training and development, and I'd love to help you with a project. Is there something you're working on or an area of training that your employees might need that I can, either job shadow your training and development person or put something together for you? It's a great way to get experience. Because sometimes people say, you can't get a job unless you actually have the experience. And then self-training, networking, again, don't discount the power of networking. Ask for what you want and be surprised if people will step up and help you out. And then figure out what is your identity, your working identity? What are your personal values? What are your strengths? You'll be able to speak to who you are and create that presence and profile. All right, so we are wrapping up a little bit early tonight. As always, thank you for being here and for participating so actively. We are going to be together on Valentine's So good for me. I know maybe not so good for some of you, but we're going to cover sections 2.5 and 2.6, pages 127 to 150, sections 2.5 and 2.6. So 2.5 is performance management. 2.6 is change management. Fun topic to talk about. And I'll take any questions you have. Let's see, I'm looking into chat. I don't see anything here in chat. If you have to go, of course, feel free to hop off. And I do want to say, if you are here and you have a 619 area code for your phone number, I need you to send me an email. I see that someone's calling in from a 619 telephone number, and I'm not able to capture your attendance. Yeah, San Diego area could be at one time.
I have a question.
Yes, please ask.
We have a shadow for our restaurant I work for.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a trail where you like follow around another server to see if you can do a job. Do they need to sign any paperwork to do that, or is there any like liability that can happen from it?
That's a
Like
good,
if they got injured or something, or like something did happen.
it's a good question, Marshall. Not that I'm aware of, because no matter what, if they get injured on the job, they're going to be covered exclusively under workers' comp. You do have to make sure the person's being paid.
So like
If they're actually performing duties while they're shadowing, they need to be paid.
they're not performing duties.
Okay, okay,
They're
then
just shadowing.
okay, then that's okay.
It's like for an hour or two, and we give them a meal at the end. So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
not
okay.
much.
As long as they're not actually doing the work, yes, that you can get away with that.
And then I had one more question. We're opening up 2 more restaurants, and I was just wondering, like, how many employees per, like, is there like an employee limit? Because I do the HR right now, and like we have 100 employees or close to it, and I'm doing
Yeah.
it like myself, but we're opening 2 more. So how many like employees per?
Yeah, the
Um,
standard ratio is for every 100 employees, you have one HR person, but that's standard. And you're working in an environment that's pretty complex, with multiple locations. So you're probably, I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm going to, you're probably starting to feel a little stretched.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that point. I also do bookkeeping, so it's like back to
Oh
back.
dear. Oh, sure. Yes. So I think you could justify asking for another person. Of
Okay, thank you.
course. Yeah, so critical incidents, I wouldn't make anything more of it other than, let's say that you have a front desk person, and a customer comes in, and you're actually seeing customers can come into your location. You have a front desk person, and the customer comes in, and the customer is upset. I've called your customer service line. I'm not getting, the response I need. The hold times are crazy. I'm really upset. And the receptionist is able to hear what the person is saying and be empathetic with the person and compassionately respond. So calming the person down, diffusing the situation, that would be a critical incident in a really positive way. And so the manager who's observing that behavior would write it down and put it away in the personnel file, so that when it comes time for reviews, that person, that's not forgotten, because sometimes the little things are forgotten. Or let's say the manager observes the front desk person, the same scenario with the customer, and the front desk person says, the only way I can help you, I can't help you. You have to call customer service. Our hold times might be long, but it's the only way you're going to get through. And then basically just totally ignores the person, just shuts the person down. Even if it's true that the only way the person's going to get help with is by going through the customer service number, there's still a way to diffuse the situation. And in that case, the person didn't do it. So the manager would note that as well and put that in the file. It wouldn't be necessarily a formal warning or anything. It's just that that's something you'd want to bring up. Now, both of those scenarios, the manager should immediately address, hey, I noticed that when that customer came in and was, pretty upset, you were so compassionate when you said, hey, I understand that must be really, really frustrating for you. And let me see what I can do to help you. Can you tell me what it is that you need to have resolved? And let's see if I can get a note to someone who will reach back out to you. Or, I'm really sorry, that is very frustrating. I can see, at this time, the only way for you to really put that in is to contact the customer service line. And, but I'm sorry, I know it's got to be very frustrating for you. So they would say, giving very specific examples, or where the person is just totally shut down, doesn't want to be bothered, rolling their eyes, whatever they're doing. The manager would go up and say, we need to, observe some behavior. Let's talk about it. Here is what I saw. Here's what I heard. The expectation is that the next time you're going to do A, B, and C instead. So that's an example of critical incident. And again, that way, when performance review, the formal written review part comes around, the person has these incidents documented. The other way critical incidents are used, and we'll touch on this when we get into compensation and benefits, is when setting the wage structure. When setting expectations for the job, you can look at a group of employees who perform really well, high performing employees. You'd look at their critical incidents and say, these are the standards we want to set for all new hires. Hopefully that helps. That was a long-winded explanation.
So can I ask a question off of that? Kind of.
Sure.
Okay. When you're dealing with a manager who is looking at a critical incident like that, or something along the lines of that, and is writing up an employee for one form or another, usually something they're doing wrong, if they put a general write-up where it's not detailed, not time, like there's no time on it, date on it, no detail, no backup, is that something that can backfire if the employee isn't given corrective training and like really worked through on it, and they are just keep getting written up for the same thing, and when the employee asks for more information or more help or more details and they don't get it, is that something that can backfire on an employer, I mean?
Yeah, it could, yes. If it's never addressed, and then suddenly the person gets called into the office one day and say, sorry, but your employment is terminated. And the employee is like, why? And then the manager just kind of like spills it all out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the employee was,
what I mean is, if they write it up like a report, like they're saying they're writing up the employee that for example, they were rude to a customer or a former employee on such and such date, but they don't back it up with what they were rude about or that they were even rude. And the employee says, can you give me an example so I know? And they don't follow through with that. Is that something that can get in trouble?
well, okay. So I want to just back up to the idea of employment at will. And that is that an employee can be terminated with or without cause, with or without notice at any time. And unless, obviously, excluding any discriminatory reason for termination. But yes, there are situations where it can certainly backfire, especially if that manager, maybe somebody else was doing something similar, but they weren't written up. Yeah, it's just good business practice. Is it going to lead to somebody getting in trouble, like the company, like being sued? Not unless it was for a discriminatory reason, or that person was being treated differently than other people.
Okay, so that wouldn't be considered harassment because the employee didn't know anything, like didn't even realize anything had happened, or anything bad, and can't get direction and corrective because of it.
No.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that in itself is not harassment. Yeah. You're welcome. I think a statement should be collected from all persons. So if you have to conduct a formal investigation around harassment, you absolutely need to collect, to make sure that you're writing things down, details, who, what, when, where, why, how, and keep it on file in a separate investigation folder. Yes, I did ask the question about where's the answer key for the knowledge checkpoints in the Hive. I haven't heard back. I'll follow up on that. And it's Stefan, right?
It's actually Steven.
Dang, it's okay. Thank you. I was second guessing. Thank you, Steven. All right, everyone. Have a great evening. Rest of the week. Yes. See you Monday.
Is there a time limit on the turnaround time for an exam? Because I was trying to do one this weekend, and I don't think it was like exactly 24 hours. And I kept getting this notice that said there was like a 24-hour time gap that had to occur. Is that with all the exams?
Yes. You do have to wait 24 hours between taking the practice assessments. Yes, all of them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Bye, Stephen.